Welcome back to At the Farm Gate. I'm Jack Hughes, and in this episode we're heading to the front line of poultry protection, looking at how strong biosecurity can make all the difference in a season that's already seen worrying numbers of disease outbreaks across the country. I'm joined by Sally Hutton from Crowshall Vets, who brings over a decade of experience in poultry consultancy. Together, we'll explore the most common on-farm biosecurity pitfalls, how to tighten up prevention and surveillance, and how to strike the right balance between practical measures and vaccination strategies. So, nice to see you, Sally. You've been
Good to see
working
you too.
in the poultry health sector and consultancy for over 11 years. Could you start by telling us a little bit about your role at Crowshall and what drew you into this field?
Sure, thanks, Jack. So I'm currently director of Crowshall Veterinary Services. I became director/partner back in 2020. As you said, I've been here for 11 years now. Going, back to the very origins, I suppose. I was one of those annoying kids at the age of 9 who knew exactly what they wanted to do. I wanted to be a vet. I did have a very special interest in avian species. I really loved ducks, chickens, etc. My aunt actually had a free-range chicken farm, and I loved going and staying with her. And for my 11th birthday, I was given an incubator, as you do. So I was just absolutely fascinated in that side of things. So very luckily, managed to get into vet school, became a vet. Along the way, noticed I wasn't getting a lot of teaching in the poultry side of things. So went out of my way to do a master's in infectious disease and control, which also tied into a research project with Ghana at the University of Liverpool, which we're very lucky to travel to Ethiopia and see poultry out there. And as part of that, I presented at the British Veterinary Poultry Association, where I was very lucky to also bump into what would be then my future boss, Claire Knott, and came and saw practice at Crowshall Veterinary Services. And on the back of that, actually was offered a job. So they said, come here, see how you get on for a year. And 11 years later, still can't really imagine doing anything else. I was the 5th vet at the point of joining, and we've now grown to 14 vets, which is amazing. And as part of that, part of my day-to-day is looking after my clients, it's helping to onboard any new recruits vet-wise, also keeping tabs on the team, supporting them in any ways that they might need, and also, as you know, supporting our clients with farm visits, post-mortems, all the testing requirements that they may have, and just not picking up the phone, talking to people.
Oh, so a very varied role, and you're obviously now part of the woodwork, as they like to say, of Crowshall Vets.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. I mean, we've seen a sharp rise in outbreaks, this season, and they're still coming, unfortunately. So for farmers, who are trying to strengthen the biosecurity, but they don't have that endless amount of resource or personnel on farms, where should they really be focusing to make the biggest difference?
Definitely. And I know that a lot of these biosecurity requirements can come with a lot of hefty price tag as well. So our advice would be look at any water ingress. So that seems to be number one where we think infections are getting into sites, is water coming in through the roofs or in through the sides of buildings. So check to see where your water ingress is coming in and address those key issues as soon as possible. Other places might be bedding as well. We have seen a number of outbreaks, especially in the previous very bad season of 22 to 23, which is contamination of straw beddings, etc. So finding that keeping birds away from where you might be storing your bedding is especially important, and anything else, any other equipment that you use inside the houses, it's just keeping those away from wild birds. And as you may have noticed, a great many of the outbreaks is centering around wildfowl and water areas. So if there are any ponds on site, trying to keep waterfowl or any other birds away from there, netting if at all possible. I know it's not very easy, and I know it's easier said than done. And we were talking about not having endless supplies of money, but it does go a long way to protecting your flock. And also imbuing how important biosecurity is in anyone on your site, having that conversation, helping people and yourself understand why it's so important that you're doing the things that you're doing in order to keep your flock safe.
Yeah, and I think that leads on to, biosecurity is, people do get fatigued as such.
Definitely.
So how do we keep people motivated on farms, producers and staff? Sometimes in this industry there's a large turnaround in staff, or we have multiple different staff coming in on a weekend, for egg collection or stockmanship. How do we keep
Mm,
these people sticking to the right habits?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if we have the answer to that, we'd have the answer, right? But it goes back to making everything as easy as you humanly can, isn't it? We are creatures of habit, we are human, and if things are made easy for us, we will do them more readily than things that are made difficult for ourselves. So if it comes to even step over barriers, having somewhere to sit down and be able to change your footwear, just showing people the correct way of doing that, and having different footwear for inside versus outdoors, which really signifies you're wearing the right or the wrong one. So it's easy to sort of check up as well, because that's also human nature, isn't it? It's one
Yeah,
of those that if it's not easy to check on, then things can slip. So making things easy, making things visible, and educating people, and also unfortunately not letting up. If you let people slide, and yourself slide as well, you have to be the person who does everything correctly in front of everyone in order to show them the way forward. So
yeah,
yeah.
of course. And just going back to the likes of water ingress, and that's
Mm,
something we whether if there's any studies out there on this yet, but when we do see bad weather come in, as we are doing currently in the UK, a deluge in water, we do
yeah.
see this uptake in outbreaks. But
Hmm.
now, as we're coming away from possibly the turkeys being on the ground, for instance, and the Christmas turkeys, hopefully, we're getting up to Christmas, most of them will be on the shelves.
Yeah.
Um, in units what are statutory and solid, built units,
Mm.
is there any real reason water should be getting into these sheds? And do people have to change the mindset when we're walking past things and going, oh, well, we'll do that tomorrow? How do we
Yeah.
bring that to the forefront of people's minds that this is a serious way of this disease getting in there?
Well, like you say, it always seems to follow. Whenever we see the weather now, we're just waiting for the next outbreak, for the next phone call, someone saying, we've got a few dead birds, things aren't looking quite right. So even though it might not be official, traceable,
Mm,
fully evidence, sort of evidence there, it is definitely something that we are seeing. It's a pattern that's emerging, and it's something that we have to treat as a very real threat and a very real risk. Even within units that I sometimes walk around and it's been raining and you can see water coming through the sides, I always, make them stop, make them fence it off, make them, even with a bale wall or something along those
mm,
lines. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be temporary, and just keeping the birds away from any sort of water ingress as well. I think people think sometimes that they need to fix the problem before they can do something about it, but actually just sectioning birds away from that area while you sort it out will go a long way to helping as well.
yes, of course.
Mm.
So obviously, Crowshall provides diagnostic services, um, and you do testing you do PCR testing as well.
Not yet, but something that we hope to offer in the future at some point.
And do you think that by bringing that kind of technology in, that'll change the way we can identify and respond to these issues?
Yes, I mean, obviously, if we do suspect avian influenza, then we have to call the
Yeah.
OPHA, and they're the ones who do the official avian influenza testing. That's the important point. But you're right in terms of other organisms that we do PCR testing for. I mean, currently we, as a lab ourselves, we do a lot of serology testing, a lot of RSA, a lot of ELISAs. We also do salmonella boot swabs testing and a lot of bacteriology as well. So it's just that one bit of technology, the PCR, that we don't ourselves offer, but we do send on samples to a lot of labs, and so we do have that way. But it would be good to have PCR under a roof as well, so we just get that sort of speed of turnaround. Really, we're not waiting for the post, etc., to come and go. But you're right, it will help us, as everything does, every diagnostic test does. It does help us inform what's going on and react to issues quicker once we
Yeah.
understand what it is that we're actually dealing with, of course.
So with the current diagnostic tests and services that you offer to the industry, do you see a large uptake in that, or is it some companies and businesses like to test, or how do you find the uptake in that?
I find that people are actually becoming more and more interested in testing their flocks, what to test for, when to test for those things, and what they can do with that information. We've currently started, well, we've started expanding what we can do online in terms of giving that more of a visual representation to our clients. So sort of combining the technology with our old tests, because our old tests aren't very technical, serology and RSA, but the information, the picture that it can give you, we're now working with our clients to be able to present that to them in a more user-friendly way so that they can actually look back on flocks, they can look back on crops, they can look back on sites, and they can see what the issues have been, and they can use that data to sort of inform whether it's sort of investments or vaccination changes, etc. We can work alongside them to be able to work out how best to push forward. So people are becoming a lot more interested in that side of things as technology moves forward, and ease of interacting with that information also moves with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the way it's also presented back to the end user and how useful they can make sense of that, I suppose. So
Definitely.
in regards to that, what role does this play? How can we, surveillance as such and presenting data play in spotting issues before potentially it goes any further, or to try and go back to the root cause? How do you see that panning out?
Well, definitely. I mean, for example, we've had a few outbreaks of inclusion body hepatitis in some of our broilers, and by using some of these technologies that we have by our site, we could see quite quickly that it was kind of coming from one parent flock, and then we could go back to that parent flock and work out what was going on there, how it might have got in, what the control strategy was going forwards, what placement strategies for those birds coming out of those parent flocks looked like. So it is very important to be able to utilize that information in that way, because that does actually really inform real world decisions, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
Of course, and we can only make decisions with the data that's presented in front of ourselves.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about surveillance, that as we're going to see more and more of in the coming years, is the role and surveillance into the possibility of an avian influenza vaccine. I mean, where do you think we are at with an avian influenza vaccine?
So I do know that there are going to be some trials coming up in the UK, which might help influence that decision. So we'll sort of watch with bated breath as to see how those goes. But on the back of that, all we can do is look at the studies that have been undertaken in France, where they've had quite a vast mass vaccination over there, and how that has come about. And whereas some of the results seem promising, we'll also have to watch to see how it goes this year, when they're also having a similar level of infection to us. And as we've suspected the entire time, it's not going to be a silver bullet. Vaccination's only as good as the health of the birds at the time that they're vaccinated, only as good as the actual vaccination process in itself. And as you mentioned, the surveillance that goes hand in hand with that, it is going to be not only costly in terms of the price of the vaccine, but it's going to be immensely costly in terms of the prices of the surveillance and like you say, the PCR testing, etc., going forward. And whether people can bear the cost of that is another thing, given that the government stance does not seem to be to give people money in order to do that. Then my also concern is the veterinary workload, because there is some implication that the surveillance work might have to be undertaken by vets, in which case we'd have to massively increase our number of vet resourcing available to ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Which presents a few problems, because no one really goes into veterinary work to for the surveillance side of things, do they? I mean, I know it's part and parcel of the job, but it's one of those that if we are just doing surveillance as part of the work, or if it makes up a large part of the workload, I don't see that as being very attractive for new graduates, to be honest.
No, not necessarily something you come into the field for.
No, exactly. And I think they've seen that elsewhere, with TB testing, etc. But this possibly stands to be even greater than that. So yeah, it depends, doesn't it, on the uptake and how keen people are, and what this sort of surveillance structure as a part of a vaccination process would look like as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we'll be keeping an eager eye on the potential trials coming into next year, and see how that rolls out, but just to back up what you're saying there, it is, there's a big uptake there by the farmer, and how does that surveillance look? And there's also that concern, as you mentioned, it's only as good as what's given. And on the farm, if we're giving a vaccine, are we then going to start lacking back on biosecurity because it's necessarily no longer a problem? And I think, and that's
that is the concern, isn't it? That we're concerned that people will say, well, there's a vaccine now, what are we doing biosecurity for? But as I've said previously, the vaccination is only as good as the health of the bird. If the bird is constantly under bombardment because the biosecurity is not good, so other viruses and other bacteria are getting onto that farm and challenging the bird, that at the point of the vaccination they're not able to mount a proper immune response in order to that, you can only really get a good response from healthy birds, and if they're not healthy in the first place, then it's going to work against the vaccine. It's not going to work as well. And I think, as we've discussed in the past, vaccines are a really good tool in the toolbox, but it's not the answer. It's something that I think everyone wants the possibility or availability to use, but as long as people, and I think a lot of people do, is recognize that actually it's not going to be, as I said before, the silver bullet. It's going to take everything else. It's going to take biosecurity. It's going to take changes to infrastructure in order to decrease what is a really horrific virus.
Of course, I mean, and we're talking, around other challenges as well, and given how busy yourself and other vets around the country are currently, particularly with the season that we're having,
yes.
Not to, we know what's taking up most of your attention right now, obviously with the elephant in the room as such, avian influenza. But what other challenges are we seeing out there? What farmers should be looking at, and what might be emerging in pattern wise? While we're completely tunnel focused on avian influenza at the minute, what else is still bubbling around in the background?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Even if you're sort of in emergency conditions as we are at the moment, there's still the day-to-day, the everyday veterinary work which you've got to be getting on with. So aside from avian influenza, we're still seeing a bit of inclusion body hepatitis, like I mentioned, in broilers, still seeing a fair bit of blackhead in turkeys. And on the back of that, we're also seeing some Pasteurella issues, so some bacterial issues also in turkeys. Seeing some quite novel salmonella strains coming out, which obviously bring the APHA in because they're quite interested in any novel strange and the antimicrobial resistant pattern that might come on the back of that. So that's also taking a fair bit of our time up, and just the general enteritises in layers and enteritises in broilers and wet litter conditions, etc. That come part and parcel with this time of year as well. So still very busy on all fronts, really.
And do you see that increase, obviously, as we've got with the season that we're having? Do you see that interaction increasing between poultry producers and yourselves and vets at the moment? Because they might get a bit of mortality, so they think they're on the back foot, so they're getting in touch because they think it may be avian influenza, but you're actually finding other issues there instead.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite nice when we do that, to be honest, when there's someone who comes in who's really worried about their flock, and either on the history we can offer reassurances, or on the basis of post-mortem investigation we can say, in our experience this isn't looking like this, and with the clinical picture it doesn't appear to be this. So yeah, it is quite reassuring when we get birds in which aren't due to avian influenza, to be honest. And like I said, if people are at all concerned, then pick up your phone and talk to your vet, because they, it might not be what you think it is. It might be something else that you can actually treat, that you can actually do something about, which won't be the worst case situation for you and your birds.
Right, well, we've spoken a bit around disease and challenges there. I mean, what trends are you seeing, in farm management and risks to farm that could be a concern for the future?
For the future, so obviously at the moment we're sort of moving across to 30 kilograms per meter squared for broilers. So the fight is on for space at the moment, and space is limited. So obviously there's quite a bit of sort of building work going on, but there's sort of the new broiler sites are obviously obligated to ensure that they have the right water conditions, so they have to build reservoirs, which is absolutely the worst thing that you can do
Yeah,
when
just invite the birds down.
exactly, yeah, amongst your lovely broiler sites. So there are concerns to do with that. I'd say. I think it's also in terms of, like I said, infrastructure and space availability. A lot of the buildings out there are very old at the moment, or only getting older. I mean, there's a lot of new builds, but I'd say a fair amount of the buildings are very old, and they are going to require quite a bit of reinvestment in order to get them up to places which are probably better biosecurity wise, rodent control wise, water ingress wise, etc. So, and just also as we sort of circle back to making it easier for people to comply with solid barriers that they can actually sit on, etc., and sort of demarcate biosecure areas more easily. So I think those are the main things that sort of coming up. Is it's going to be the fight for space and what that looks like in buildings going forwards, really.
Yeah, and I think you touched on that nicely there. You know, the more, as we're coming down to that 30 kilo, the more the more sheds we're going to need, the more space we're going to need, and on the other side, in the laying sector, as we move away from colony units, for instance, you know, we are seeing that bigger growth in the free range sector.
Yeah.
So land is becoming more and more sparse as such, and more units that are going up in an industry where it's pretty hard to bring staff into, particularly young people, obviously young staff leaving schools or colleges or universities to come into the farming side of things. It's
Yeah.
quite a difficult industry to retain staff in. So the bigger we go and the wider out we're spread, you know, there is that larger potential as we see year on, you know, with larger outbreaks, unfortunately, because we're going to be either closer to our neighbours or closer to areas due to land. You know, I mean, from the other side of that, I guess how do we bring young people into this industry? Sally?
Well, I mean, recruitment, it seems to be difficult in every single sector, but I do hear you. Every single farm I go to, we sort of talk about how difficult it is to bring young people into it. And at the end of the day, it's a really hard role, isn't it? It's a lifestyle, it's not a job. And I think it's difficult to be flexible in that sort of work, but actually flexible working is something that we probably have to move across to. But that does mean more recruitment rather than less, because actually you need more people in order to fulfill the hours that's required. So, and I think it comes down to education. I mean, farming programs are becoming more attractive, aren't they, and more popular. So hopefully with a bit of that, but actually as the poultry industry, we're not very good at getting our positives out there. I think because we're so defenseless and we're so defenseless, but I think it's because, you know, we have to be quite defensible because it does appear that we're under constant scrutiny, doesn't it, from certain activist groups, etc. So you do have to be careful, but at the same time, I think hiding away doesn't always necessarily mean that people consider it as a role. And there's many positives to the side of it. I mean, yeah, everyone works really hard, and I think you only have to spend a bit of time with people that work on farms to realize that they really value the animals, and actually they really value everything that they put into the role and into the job. So it's probably visibility, but I wouldn't really know how to even begin to start doing that, to be honest. So
No, but I think it's massively important that people do start to speak about this as as the industry, as we say, grows, but also coming down to lower stocking densities and getting more free range units, for instance. We do need more staff, but we're bringing more staff. We're also bringing more risk if things are not managed correctly, specifically, on people entry and movement around farms. So we do, as a collective in the industry, we do need to really look at that and how we maintain that.
Definitely. I
So
mean, something that we've, sorry, I mean,
no, go
something
for
that
it.
we've, something that we found useful ourselves is actually we've become a lot more involved in the teaching aspect of things. So we have veterinary students come here on rotation, on 2 weekly rotations. Obviously, they have to elect for that. That has to be a choice on their behalf, but the interest is growing, which is reassuring. But also, we're getting inside the universities and we're helping with the teaching aspect of things. And I think visibility of everything. when I was looking into this job, I didn't actually know this existed until I started doing my research project. So I was 3 years down the road before I even realised that poultry practice was a possibility. So it's just getting those jobs out there, isn't it? It's getting the information out there, like you say.
Yeah, of course. So before we finish up, Sally, I mean, you've probably touched on a lot of this throughout the talk, but as we are in a very challenging time at the minute, what is one piece or any advice to farmers, who want to future-proof through this tough season and moving forwards to protect the flocks against diseases? What can we shout out about that?
I mean, it has been investment, and that can be in time, not just money. So invest your time in educating yourselves, in educating the people that work for you, and stay stay curious about your site, understand where the possibilities of infection may occur. So if you know that water ingress is a problem, then look into that. If you know rodent control is a problem, obviously get on top of that, and I think just stay aware. I mean, it's so easy, especially as the season drags on, just to, like you say, get a bit complacent. So just treat every day as a new day, as a fresh day, and just carry on looking for ways that you can keep protecting your flock and yourselves and your people and your investment.
Well, thank you for that, Sally, and thank you for coming on today and informing everybody. It's a huge help and getting our voice out there.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me, Jack.
So I'd like to thank you, Sally, for coming on and for your insights and the experience at such a critical time to the industry. And with outbreaks continuing to challenge poultry health this season, every action counts, from tightening farm entry protocols to reviewing biosecurity plans. If you found this discussion useful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll be bringing you more expert advice to help protect your livestock and your livelihood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.